The Politics podcast is brought to you by the Patreon. Head on over to the Patreon, folks. It is found there at patreon.com/JURY. Not only do you get this program, not only do you get the jury program, but you get these little mini episodes as well. Man, thank you to everybody who has supported us. Also by The Contender, the game of presidential debate, yada, yada, yada. It's a card game. I love it. Let's go ahead and start the show.
Politics, 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 politics. Politics, yes.
Hard as the granite state. Welcome everybody to the Politics mini episode. Stop it. The mini episode wherein we break down the New Hampshire primary that happened last night. My name is Justin Robert Young, and I do 4 podcasts about politics a week, and you can't teach that. New Hampshire. New Hampshire is the granite state that holds the first in the nation primary. You might be saying to yourself, but Justin, there was the first in the nation contest last week. It was in Iowa. 99999 is what I would say, because that was a caucus. This is a primary. I hope you're caught up to speed. Winners and losers. Let's you want to do that? You want to do the big winners and losers? Let's do winners and losers. As I set up in my preview, the big question on the Democratic side was Saint Bernard, the sainted Saint Bernard. Could he indeed drive his flock not only to victory, but to decisive victory in New Hampshire? He was polling very, 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 very well there. He was somebody for whom had doubt driven into his campaign by not winning in Iowa and not completing the gigantic upset that it would have been there considering their polling. But meanwhile, here in New Hampshire, wherein it borders his home state of Vermont, he had not only home field advantage, he had an electoral advantage in terms of the key voters for him, very liberal white people, were in grand abundance. And it was something that was very big for him and had continued to be very big for him in the polling. So let's go ahead and get to our Democratic results. I'll tell you what, I brought up every possible little number so I could throw to graphics, and yet for whatever reason I did not have the actual stuff pulled up, the actual numbers on who won. Here we go. Let's find the actual stop the thing. Man, this is great. This is a great. Why can't I just find Democratic New Hampshire results? Great radio. This is the best thing about doing one mic radio, right? Is that you just, here we go. Democratic with 151,584 votes cast in his favor, 60%, a commanding lead for Hillary Clinton, for Bernie Sanders, rather. Hillary Clinton on the other end, 95,252 for 38 points. That, folks, for people who don't do math none good, is a 22-point shellacking. That's a beating. Go out behind the shed and grab the hose because this mofo got beat. Damn. You just got knocked the fuck. That's what Chris Tucker would say if you were watching the movie Friday. It also really bodes poorly for Hillary Clinton. So as you can see, this was just an absolute dominating performance by Bernie Sanders. So what does this mean? Well, it means that everybody who prays and prays on the downfall of Hillary Clinton have a whole couple weeks to pelt her with loser, 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 loser. It's going to be a rough few weeks in the press for her. And really, all she can do and her surrogates can do is attack Bernie Sanders and point scoreboard in South Carolina, where she is doing very, 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 very well. What does this do for Bernie Sanders? Well, it's something that a lot of people expected. So it's not like he was going to come from behind and win, which is why even the effective tie in Iowa hurt Bernie Sanders, because that would have been, we came all the way up and we totally overcame it and took her out. That's not the case here. He was running from the lead from the very, very beginning, and that doesn't change. He still wins. It's great for him. It's great for his supporters. He'll certainly raise money on it. And now you have a few weeks to just ring the 2008. You on both sides, right? Hillary Clinton's got to worry about that as an expectation for her. And Bernie Sanders can say, hey, listen, there's a lot of people out here that are telling you that I can't win a general election and that Hillary Clinton's going to win this primary. Well, guess what? They were saying the same thing about Barack Obama around this time. Although, remember, how the worm has turned. Hillary lost Iowa in a surprise, came in third. Bad result for her. And then won New Hampshire, because New Hampshire's voters are kind of famously fickle. But let's go ahead and flip on over to the other side. And really, in terms of the horse race, I think a little bit more interesting because you have more players, which is the Republican side of the equation. Here we have Donald Trump, John Kasich, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, and Marco Rubio. And then, flotsam, jetsam, who cares, ding dong, and ping pong. So let's go ahead and take a look. Again, because the whole point of this is that New Hampshire doesn't like to rubber stamp people, except for the fact that they effectively rubber stamped two people. Now, they rubber stamped two people that are still widely unexpected to do, to win the nomination, but have now a little bit more legitimacy in their resume because of how they placed here. Huge night for the Donald, the king of Trump. There is none higher. Sucker MCs can call him sire. Over 100,000 votes cast. He trots to victory with a handsome 35.3% percentage of the vote. And this is where it gets interesting, because most polling showed that this was how it was supposed to go. Trump, Rubio, one of the governors, Kasich, Bush, Christie, then Cruz, then the other two governors. And the idea would be that two of those governors would definitely drop out. The one governor that finished higher might be able to move on, especially if it was Jeb Bush, who's got a big war chest, but that he would drop. But this is where the results come in. John Kasich is your number 2. Number 3 is Ted Cruz. Number 4, Jeb Bush. John Ellis Bush. And number 5, Marco Rubio. Huh? What was that? What position did Marco Rubio come in? 5th. Say it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5th. He pled the 5th, dog. He pleads the 5th. This is a bad night. Bad night for Marco Rubio. There's really no other way to put this. And you can really blame it on two things. You kind of saw the warning signs coming in when you looked at polls that showed who you were voting for, but most likely to change your mind. Marco Rubio was number one on that list. People liked him, but I think people liked him from an electability standpoint. He had a huge tactical error on Saturday night. Since we last talked to you, let's dispel with this fiction that Marco Rubio could escape from his debate debacle on Saturday night unfazed. Because that, my friends, did not happen. Chris Christie, who dropped out of the race today as I talked to you the day after the New Hampshire primary, along with iCarly Fiorina, effectively ran up into St. Anselm's College in New Hampshire and suicide bombed Marco Rubio. For whatever reason, the first time that Chris Christie decided to take off his gloves and start throwing real haymakers, the likes of which are only really unique and appropriate for New York and New Jersey politics, he decided to knock Rubio the hell out, which totally put him on tilt. He had a meltdown. I mean, I don't know. Meltdown might be a little bit hard because if you really look at the totality of his debate performance, people in general liked him, and he got a lot of search results based on his answer, his pro-life answer later in the debate. However, that dude got caught up in what I would consider our democracy's first ever Vine gaffe. Now, let me fill you in on this. Because normally, in debate gaffes, you have one singular moment. There you go again, right? You have one singular moment. You have one singular moment that makes everything a different race because you have one little piece of information to look at. Marco Rubio dispelled with this fiction that he could repeat the same point in different words over and over and over again because he repeated the same point in the same words over and over and over and over again. Now, if you're watching it, you might think, oh, wow, did he just say that? I don't know. I can't remember if he just said that. It sounds like it's something he said a couple times. But Christie comes out, points out that he repeats sound bites, and then Marco Rubio repeats the same sound bite over and over and over and over again. So it's like, yeah, as a viewer, you are probably looking out for it, but it just looks devastating when you put it back to back to back to back to back to back to back. In fact, let's go ahead and play that for you now. Marco Rubio malfunctions. Malfunctions, of course. Here we go. Beep boop. Marco Rubio malfunctioning in New Hampshire. Let's go ahead and take a look at...
Because as you saw, Jeanette and I are raising our 4 children in the 21st century, and we know how hard it's become to instill our values in our...
Oh, no, that's not it. Come on. Gawker, you're killing me. You're killing me. Here we go. Under attack, Marco Rubio malfunctions and repeats the same lines 4 times, and they don't have a thing. Whatever. So maybe it's not as ubiquitous as I might have thought initially. But it was huge that night. Marco Rubio then kind of doubled down on it and said, hey, listen, I'm going to keep repeating that line because it's what I believe. I thought that was a terrible answer. I thought that was a terrible way to deflect that. And I think it really sunk his chances in New Hampshire. Because this, my friends, is the Justin Robert Young politics golden rule of how to run a presidential campaign. It is never the scandals. It is never the gaffes. It is never the problems that define a campaign. It is the reactions or lack thereof that define the campaign. Now, a lot goes in to what you have in your chest and your toolbox to deal with gaffes. But I thought that Marco Rubio... Let's dispel with this fiction that Marco Rubio didn't have enough moves to make after something like that happens. Because he's got at least 2. Number 1, he's by far the most likable candidate in that he has an emotional style of speaking. People connect with him on a personal level, the likes of which they really don't with Donald Trump. You look up to Donald Trump, and I don't mean personally like you think he's a great guy, but Donald Trump places himself on a pedestal beyond you, right? So you admire Donald Trump if you have a personal opinion, but you don't look at Donald Trump and say, hey, that could be me, right? Ted Cruz seems very similarly like somebody who is apart from you. Now, he might share your values, but I don't think a lot of people say, hey, Ted Cruz, I'm like him. Marco Rubio, on the other hand, has some of that ability, much like Barack Obama, to have, he's young, he's ambitious, he is how we like to think of ourselves, even if we are older. So you have the ability to say, hey, listen, man, I had a bad night. Or use, let's dispel with this fiction as a joke, and then seg into your serious point. He did none of that. He made it seem like he got pantsed on stage and he was upset about it, which is the worst thing you can do when you actually get pantsed on stage. First rule in this game, dog, never let him see you sweat. And Rubio was sweating like Brock Lesnar 15 minutes into a match at SummerSlam. Slip and slide. Rubio's the biggest loser. Let's go through the rest of the results. Here's the co-biggest loser, Jeb Bush. Because look at this. If you have Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio drop out, immediately the other one, considering they are drawing from almost the same voting block, immediately the other candidate becomes very popular. Jeb Bush spent nearly $50 million in New Hampshire. What does he get? 11% of the vote. Dude barely gets beaten by Ted Cruz. Hachi Machi. Ted Cruz, meanwhile, was nominally campaigning in New Hampshire. Homeboy is like, whatever, man. Like, I just want to prove that I'm a 50-state candidate, and I'm not just here for the evangelicals. That you can get me out here campaigning if I'm not going to show up at a Bible study and go high-five the Duck Dynasty dude in front of a bunch of vacation Bible school students. Like, he just wanted to show up to prove that he went to New Hampshire. So John Ellis Bush, homie, it just ain't your year. I want somebody to have that clip ready for when Jeb Bush, totally out of the blue, wins the nomination and then the presidency. But I don't think it is. It's just not that dude's year. I don't know how many more ways. I think he had a very good turn in New Hampshire, to be honest with you. He looked like the candidate that I thought he was going to be at the end of last summer. A guy with a lot of money, a lot of experience, and a lot of policy. That he could come out and say, this is not just a problem. Let me point out what I'm going to do about it. It's when Trump got super big, I thought, well, Jeb Bush is going to look great. Because for every time that Donald Trump says we're going to build a wall, he can say, well, hey, look, we have this wall. We spent this much money on it. We try to enforce it like this. Now, are you for building a wall on this element of real estate or on that element of real estate? And how high should the wall be? Because right now it's this. And are you proposing it that it's this, that, and the other? Make him look dumb based on the facts. Or actually run like a politician and do what he did in that debate, which got totally overshadowed by let's dispel with this notion, this fiction that Donald Trump didn't get super lucky at this debate, because that was a bad debate for Donald Trump. It was really bad. Dude got booed. He got testy with the crowd. He got hammered on a eminent domain thing where in New Jersey he kicked out an old woman so he could make a limo parking lot for one of his casinos. It was terrible. Marco Rubio wound up being the recipient of the dude who of all the bad press, but Donald Trump had a bad night, and it was because of Bush. And yet, And yet, 31,000 votes for 11%. Right up between a spicy Latino sandwich of Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. They're all bunched up in one little pack, and it is a bad look because the people of New Hampshire did select a moderate Republican that they wanted to get behind. And it wasn't Marco Rubio, and it wasn't John Ellis Bush. It was Rick Ocasek. I mean, John Kasich. Listen, I know why you're coming here, wasting all my time. Because when he gets you oh so near, he kind of loses his mind. Yeah. John Kasich, 15.8%, big overperformance on his polls, 44%. So he gets walloped by Trump, but cuts himself out of the pack in terms of Rubio, Christie, Bush. And it really doesn't mean anything. Unless, for whatever reason, the voters down there in South Carolina begin to cotton to him a lot more than they have already. He's mired in single digits there. He's going to get his butt whipped. And he's probably the least likely to be able to adjust to that demographic. You got a lot of evangelicals down there, a lot of hardliner conservatives down there, the likes of which saying, hey, everybody, I'm a moderate. The New York Times endorsed me. Will not fly. Let's also understand this. Part of these results could have been affected by the fact that Sanders was a blowout winner and liberal-leaning independents can vote in either primary. When you are in New Hampshire, you can be undeclared or independent, and you can ask for either of the two major parties' primary. So if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter and you know that Bernie has got it locked up, then you can say, well, you want to know what? I like Kasich. I'm going to vote for Kasich. Bernie's got it. I'm going to vote for Kasich. So that might have affected some of the element of what came out of here. Meanwhile, in the Flotsam and Jetsam category, we got Carly Fiorina with 11, Ben Carson with 6 for 2.3% of the vote. For Carson, 4.1% of the vote for iCarly. iCarly dropped out. Chris Christie dropped out. Ben Carson, man, I'll tell you what, if this is the last ride for Ben Carson, I'm upset because we won't have another state that we get to go to and have him be just the nicest guy on the planet anymore, which is what he did again in New Hampshire as well as in Iowa when we went to go drop off contender boxes to all the candidate HQs. Holy smokes, Ben Carson, can you just run something else? When you're done running for president, I just want to go visit a place where people who like you are, because they're so nice. I guess maybe church. That's a bridge too far. So who's the big winners? Donald Trump's the big winner on the Republican side. Ted Cruz is the big winner on the Republican side for doing as well as he was doing, barely trying. John Kasich is a winner, but I don't know if he is a gigantic winner going into South Carolina. So let's go ahead and take a look at what those numbers look like. Now, these are very, very early numbers because obviously they don't take into effect what happened last night. But the earliest results that we have are likely voter polls from being sampled up until the 23rd of January. Nothing from February yet. And in those polls, you've got the Real Clear Politics average is Donald Trump at 36, Cruz at 19.7, Rubio at 12.7, Bush at 10, Carson at 8.7, Christie at 2.3, Huckabee, Kasich, Paul Fiorina, farts, and none of them are in it, except for John Kasich, who is polling amidst 5 people who are no longer in the race. Yeah, Gamble says over 2 weeks old pre-Iowa. So a lot of this might change. Let's take some preliminary stakes on what is up for grabs in South Carolina. I don't think this is a winner-take-all for either Rubio or Bush, but I'm going to go ahead and take a prediction, all right? And you want to know what? I'll do more about what's at stake in South Carolina in the next actual episode of the podcast, which will be on Friday. But let me just end here. Donald Trump has done very, very, very well and is now a legitimate frontrunner in a way that I don't think a lot of people thought of him as a legitimate frontrunner before. I think this is largely because not a lot of the candidates have gone after him. Everyone has kind of just thought that he's going to say something that ruins his candidacy at any given moment. That the voters will say, maybe not. Well, that hasn't happened. And while Chris Christie scored the big splashy headlines by knocking out Marco Rubio on stage, nobody really paid attention to the fact that Jeb Bush cold clocked Trump. The next debate that we will see will feature everybody dog piling on Trump. And I don't believe that between Rubio and Bush, I still think that one of either Rubio or Bush, they're going to be there at the end. But the one that gets that momentum will be the one to bring the establishment the head of Donald Trump. He is a marked man. In politics, there's the saying that two things can end your campaign: a dead woman or a live boy, in terms of scandals. Either you found out that you're a murderer or you're a pedophile. A gay pedophile, I guess, is inherent to that. We are going to find out everything. And I mean everything that there is to know about Donald Trump by the time that South Carolina is over and the SEC primary is over on March 1st. There will be no stone unturned. And if they're smart, they are going to hit Trump on this. I'm telling you now, when this happens, you're going to be able to come back to me and say, Gerbs, you were right. The line on Trump is that he is a carpetbagger and a crybaby. That's how they'll attack him, because that's where you have the most substance to go back on. You've got a million tweets of him freaking out on every other little thing. You have a million pieces of evidence that the dude says he's pro-choice, that he's for universal health care. You can tie him to things, but I think everybody was kind of figuring that Donald Trump's so unorthodox, we can't run against him like a normal candidate. The time has come, and the establishment candidate to break out will be the one that makes him bleed. Or Donald Trump is indeed impervious to bullets and becomes the next president of our great nation.
Politics, politics, politics.
That's it for our mini-sode. We'll be back on Friday with our actual episode. Please, hey, do me a favor. We're doing these mini-sodes. I'm working hard for y'all. How about you go ahead and rate us on iTunes? Review us on iTunes. I want to get into those politics top charts. Come on, son. We're making a run. See you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.